And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. A lot of action going on around Major League Baseball. Big weekend for the Seattle Mariners, who find themselves within 3 or 4 games of the AL West crown right now. Everybody thought the Rangers and Astros were going to run away with it, and they still likely will. But what a run it has been for the Seattle Mariners. We'll get into their impressive week and how the rest of baseball is kind of shaking out right now as we get ready for the postseason stretch here. So make sure you hit that subscribe and like button if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, looking at where things are, at least at the moment, still have the same 3 division leaders, Baltimore, Texas, and Minnesota. Wild card still largely the same with one exception. Seattle now finds themselves at least sitting currently in playoff position. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 6 straight. By the way, they swept Houston over the weekend. What a great series that was for Seattle. Really launched their season back into getting it back in the right direction. And what a change it's been for Seattle. They really sold there at the deadline, got rid of their closer. They still had somebody there as a replacement in-house already in Munoz. But what a job the Seattle Mariners have done to kind of climb back into contention. Do I think they'll end up holding on to one of those wild card spots? Frankly, I don't. I just think Toronto's a little bit better team. I think the injuries, the numbers game will start to catch up to the Mariners before long. But once you get that momentum, it takes a while before it goes away. And so far, they've played very well. They've held on to that momentum. We'll see if they can hold on to it long enough to remain in wild card positioning as we get to the postseason stretch. But for my money, I still like the top 3, Baltimore, Texas, and Minnesota to win the divisions. I still like Tampa Bay, Houston, and then Toronto to ultimately get the wild card spot. So first round of the wild card round is going to be very interesting, Tampa Bay and Houston. It's going to be very interesting to see how Tampa Bay decides to stack their starting rotation now that they've had injuries in that starting rotation. McClanahan out for the year, Tommy John, etc. You have they brought it back, Glass now anyway, he's back and healthy. They make the trade for Savali. So they still have some solid starting pitching, but it's hard to believe that they'll be able to beat Houston in a short series like the American League wildcard round will be in order to get the victory there. Now, sure, it will be in their own ballpark, and it is certainly a ballpark that in the postseason has shown to be a little bit more difficult for teams to travel to and win. But Houston's a very experienced team. They're not going to be rattled by a rowdy, road crowd or anything like that. So I think Houston probably still wins that series. Then, as far as the other series, the Minnesota Seattle or Minnesota Toronto, I'm still leaning Toronto there as well, even though it would be on the road. I just think Toronto has just more horses to be able to get it done. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. Minnesota's pitched very well this season. They've more consistently, I should say. But the second half of the year is really where they fell apart last year. They're only 5 games above 500 right now. Toronto and Seattle both have better records than Minnesota. But I'm still going to go with either Toronto or Seattle, whoever gets that final wild card spot to ultimately beat Minnesota, which is hard for me to say because they were my first ever favorite team back when I was very, very small. But would like to see them advance past that. I just don't think this is the year for them, unfortunately. The rest of the teams in the wild card picture, you look here at the New York Yankees, they've really fallen back. They're 1-9 in their last 10, lost 8 straight games. This team absolutely looks listless. Now, the question will be, after the season, what do they do to solve this? Do they, A, fire Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman? Do they fire one or the other? Do they trade a whole bunch of guys? If they're able to, do they sign more talent? Do they go after Shohei? That will be another question. But for the first part, what do they do with Aaron Boone and what do they do with Brian Cashman? Like I told you many times so far this season, because Brian Cashman was able to keep Aaron Judge in-house, whether it was his entire doing or not, I think he got himself a stay of execution. He's going to be around there for a while. I think he's got at least one more year of a reprieve, even if they're terrible again next year. I think the Yankees are very happy with the job he did by bringing back Aaron Judge. Do I think that he should ultimately be removed as GM of the New York Yankees? I do. I think it's time for some fresh blood, some new thinking to get in there. This home run or nothing mentality that they've been going with, this no athletic lineup at all that they have out there, just isn't getting the job done anymore. They've gotten some nice contributions from a couple of younger players, and they've got some good talent, at least at the upper levels of the minors, that hopefully will help them out soon. But if Cashman's there, there's no guarantee that those guys will ultimately be able to make an impact because the positions that they're going to be coming into are already filled. Now, they brought up Everson Pereira, one of their top prospects today. We'll see how things shake out for the Yankees the rest of the way, but I don't think they're going to sniff the wild card round. I think we're going to be looking at Aaron Boone likely being the scapegoat for the entire team, and I think Cashman will hold on to his job for at least one more year. Welcome back, Cobra. You think the Braves are winning it all? Well, as of right now, Braves are my pick to win the National League. Are they my pick to win the World Series? If I wasn't a Rangers fan, I'd probably say yes. But the Rangers still are still in charge in the American League West anyway. I have to go with them. That's just how I see it. I just blinders on, whatever you want to call it. I like the pitching the Rangers brought in. They're going to get healthy the final couple weeks of September. Josh Young will come back. This offense will be a little bit better. But I think they've got the right mentality from their starting pitchers that they're going to be using in a postseason series. Probably have Scherzer in the first game. Eovaldi eventually will come back. He threw a bullpen session today. I think he threw 4-5 innings of a simulated game, if you will. And he's likely to come back here in the next couple of weeks. I'm expecting Eovaldi to be just as good, maybe a little bit less than that, but what he was earlier this season essentially is what I'm expecting for the Nathan Eovaldi. I think them giving him this much time off, either A, it's a serious injury and he's not going to come back at all, in which case, why are you even having him go through the motions? Or B, it really was all about making sure he was right for the playoffs. And Eovaldi, when he's right, when you get him into a postseason series, he has been money in the past. So I really like what the Rangers have. As far as who will ultimately win the American League, it's going to be fun between Houston, Tampa, Baltimore, and Houston. My pick, of course, being the Rangers. And I think they'll just be more battle-tested than say, the Atlanta Braves. I think the Braves' bullpen could be susceptible to some late-game rallies. Rangers were absolutely terrible at that the entire first half. Didn't have one late-inning rally at all in the first half. They have had several in the second half so far. So the Houston's done that multiple times. We saw the grand slam by Kyle Tucker last week anyway to win a game in the ninth against Baltimore. Baltimore, I think their pitching staff as a whole is a little bit shaky once we get into the postseason. I don't necessarily trust them. And with McClanahan going down for the Rays, I think that's a huge issue for them, not to mention the Wander Franco issue. We won't get into that, but let's just say there's questions about whether he'll ever play baseball again entirely. So keep your eyes peeled for what happens on the American League side. On the NL side, oh, I almost forgot. The LA Angels as well were the other team that made big moves at the deadline, as we said multiple times before. Not a good move. They're 8.5 back. Shohei, if he doesn't stay in Anaheim, this will have proven to be the worst deadline any team has ever had in the history of baseball. We've said this multiple times that this was gross negligence of a franchise by both ownership and the front office of the LA Angels. They're looking at least 5 years of horrible baseball there in the LA Angels organization. So if Moreno wants to sell the team after this year, if Ohtani doesn't stay, that's going to be a very difficult sell. He's not going to get nearly the money. It was a poor decision, both financially. It was a poor decision from running a baseball team. Poor decision on the field. Just poor decision making. That's just it in a nutshell for the Angels this year. And right now they're 3 games under 500. They would have to go on a very historic streak here to get back into wild card contention, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Now, as for the National League side, Cobra, I agree with you. Atlanta, I think, is going to run the table there on the NL side. Milwaukee showed me a little bit against the Texas Rangers. They swept them over the weekend as well. But again, it's August. They're a very young team. They're relying on a lot of young players in their lineup right now. They're playing a little bit above their heads offensively, as far as I'm concerned. Their pitching has been very good. That's the one thing I will say for Milwaukee. That's the one thing that gives them a chance in October, is that starting pitching staff and the back end of that bullpen. We've seen Payams have a really good year for them in the bullpen. Devin Williams as well. Of course, you have Burns, who's a Cy Young candidate here in the second half of the season. Woodruff is back now. They've got a lot of strikeouts in that starting rotation, and they've played very well. Do I think they'll win the division? At this point, I think they're going to sew up that Central Division. Teams are starting to fall back in that Central Division, the Cincinnati Reds, the Cubs of the world. And I think Milwaukee ultimately holds on to that division. That means they will probably face one of the Cubs, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, even the Reds. All have a chance to be at that final wild card spot. They will ultimately face Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee wins that round and then gets bounced quickly against either the Dodgers or the Braves. So, for my money, Milwaukee, great run. They've done a great job keeping themselves competitive for years and years. I just wonder how quickly it's going to fold up on them over the next couple of years because of their free agency issues they have coming, along with Burns, Woodruff, Adames, etc. Even in a down year, Adames is still providing them some solid hitting for them. Yelich is having a resurgent year. But they're relying on a lot of youth, and as long as that youth continues to play well, they should be fine. But we all know they all get into rookie slumps, sophomore slumps, etc. I'm not counting on it. But as for the wild card, I think Philadelphia is pretty much going to sew up that top wild card spot. Second wild card, I think, will ultimately go to the Chicago Cubs. And then that final wild card, Giants, Diamondbacks, Reds, and Marlins, going to be a little bit of a dogfight down the stretch here. Arizona's finally playing better baseball after a horrible stretch there recently. Giants have lost 7 of their last 10. But I think Cubs are going to sew up that second wild card. That final wild card, I like pitching when it comes down to the final month of the season. So timely hitting is also very important. I just don't think the Giants are ultimately the best equipped team from a pitching staff perspective. I like how they juggle the lineup. They don't care whether or not, what your name is on the back of your jersey, what the back of your baseball card says you've done. They go by production. Gabe Kapler flips that lineup one to the next, and he uses his platoons and uses them well. I just think it's going to catch up with him just a little bit. I think they're just going to finish on the outside looking in at this point. As far as who's left that I like the Miami Marlins to really put a nice run together here over the final month or so. Do I think they'll ultimately get in? They're right there. Their offense is finally playing a little bit better. Jake Berger seems like a great addition for them, and they didn't really hurt their pitching staff too much with the loss of Pablo Lopez earlier this offseason to the Minnesota Twins. Luis Arraez has been everything that offense could have hoped for. So if I had to pick one, I like the pitching for Miami, and I think their offense now has just enough to be able to get it done. I'm not trusting a young team like the Diamondbacks to be able to get it done in the month of September. I think they're going to fall on some tough times, especially with playing within that division. The Giants are in contention. The Dodgers, of course, are there. Padres, of course, decided to buy at the deadline instead of sell. They could be a team that makes a nice run here to end the season, but right now they're 7 games out. I don't think they have, or 6 games out, 7 under 500. I don't think they have a prayer of getting to the postseason. As things stand right now, I'm going to go with the Miami Marlins to get that final wild card spot. As far as what happens in the wild card round, I think Philadelphia versus the Cubs. I think Philly rolls that one fairly easily. I think the pitching staff of the Chicago Cubs is a little thin. And then you look at Milwaukee versus the Miami Marlins. I told you I really like Milwaukee for that divisional or for that wild card round. Now the divisional round, I think the Dodgers and Braves roll in that one, and then it'll be Braves and Dodgers in the NLCS. Love the Braves this year. I just think the Dodgers are significantly overmatched with whatever the Dodgers lineup ultimately ends up being, or for the Braves what they decide to trot out there from a pitching staff perspective. Whether it's Max Fried if he's healthy enough, Soroka if he's back and better, Kyle Wright, etc., Spencer Strider, Elder. They got a lot of options. Charlie Morton, starters that they can go to in a postseason series. I just think it's going to be too much for them to overcome. You're talking about 3 NL MVP candidates right now on that Atlanta Braves team versus 2 for the Dodgers. It'll be a star-studded lineup for sure for both sides, but I just think Atlanta just has way too many weapons to be able to get the job done, and I think they'll overwhelm the Dodgers at one point or another. Now, that's the one thing I really like about the Braves is their starting pitching and the depth of their starting pitching. The back end of the bullpen is a little thin. I would have liked them to go out there and get a top-end closer like a Josh Hader if he would have been able to be moved. If they could have gotten Aroldis Chapman before the Rangers did, that would have been a great piece for them. They could have gone after the Pittsburgh Pirates closer, David Bednar as well. All of those guys, I think, would have solidified themselves as the favorite. Even in my eyes, as a Rangers fan, I would still have picked the Braves over the Rangers in that type of a series. But they brought in Brad Hand. I like Iglesias in the back end. I just think in a playoff series, they're going to be a little thin on the back end. So we'll see what happens once they get to the playoffs. But right now, I have Atlanta getting to the World Series with the Rangers taking it all. But that's kind of how things stand, at least right now. Appreciate you guys joining us. We're going to start our Fantasy Football Draft live show here in just a moment. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. You guys can draft along with us. We use ESPN Draft Leagues. So if you guys want to go ahead and load up your ESPN pages, maybe you could even get in the same league as we are. But we'll see you guys there in just a moment. But thank you guys for joining us again. We'll check in with you guys tomorrow from a baseball perspective. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a couple of games for you. We got the Toronto Blue Jays and Baltimore Orioles at 6. And then if that game ends early enough, we'll do the Rangers and Diamondbacks game for you as well. So keep your eyes peeled for how that game ends up going. If that game ends soon enough, I know we got a lot of Texas fans down here. We will try to get the Rangers game for you guys tomorrow. But again, Draft Live, we're about to start that here in just a moment. And then tomorrow, Blue Jays, Orioles, we will do that one at 6. Tomorrow we will do the Rangers and Diamondbacks, time permitting. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. We'll see you guys shortly.